Hello. Anyone who's had to sit through a performance of Cats might be overjoyed to hear that Andrew Lloyd Webber is announcing that he can't make another musical, on some subject that interests him. But there is a downside to this particular bit of news, because the reason for the lack of enthusiasm about his new idea is all his friends and publishers and people around him are telling him that he's going to get attacked for cultural appropriation because the musical he was thinking of was not set in Britain. That means that if he started Evita right now, he wouldn't be able to. And talking about Cats, I dare say that would have to go as well, seeing as Lord Lloyd Webber isn't a cat. Before I carry on with more of these glad tidings, I'll tell you I'm Granniopteryx. I'm on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. I'm also on Twitter and Gab. It's on those channels I let you know that I've uploaded a new video. All the links are in the description. There are also links to donation sites if you're so inclined. But the best way you can help is to like this video, to share it and to subscribe to my channel. Okay, back to reality. The last video I made was about an arts centre that had been made out of a church. It was made out of a church because the church wasn't being used, and the church wasn't being used because people weren't coming to pray in it. That was, I assume, because local people didn't see it as relevant anymore. Now, that arts centre was in Richmond upon Thames, which is a white middle-class area, and many of the people there would have been, in previous times, the very sort that do go to church, if only to get their kids into the nearest Church of England school in order to escape the weirdness of the standard state schools. But in any case, the church schools now are getting just as weird as the state schools, so there's no escape there, I'm afraid. In my previous video, I said that the Landmark Arts Centre was a brave attempt to make a cultural meeting point out of an old church, but that arts depend on the national identity and cultural background, and without that general agreement on what is right and proper, things tend to fall apart a bit. So, even though the arts might carry on for a bit longer than the church does, it's like the light from a long dead star. The light will persist for a while, but then, there being no source anymore, even that light will eventually peter out as well. Anyway, to a star of a different sort. Here we have an article in the Telegraph, and it says here, Andrew Lloyd Webber is right. This woke new rule will be the death of art. It's not just the woke new rules, of course. It's the fact that instead of religion, which at least you can rely on for some consistency in concepts about what makes us good, we're now in a universe where the ideas we're supposed to hold to make ourselves good may change not just from day to day, but from hour to hour. So you can't rely on anything anymore for your cultural references or expectations. Let's see, what do we have here? Andrew Lloyd Webber has abandoned an idea for a new musical after he was told that it might cause offence. Guess why? No, it was nothing to do with racism or sexism, nor was his idea homophobic, transphobic, fatphobic or ableist, or indeed, I suppose, none of the other fashionable names with phobic and ist on them, I presume. So it carries on. The problem with his proposed musical, apparently, is that it wasn't set in Britain. So, let's see what we shouldn't be watching in theatre that is also not set in Britain. Yeah, there's a nice video here. How about Le Bayadère? I'll play a video here. Pretty, isn't it? Well, it's set in India, so tough luck. You know what? That's not a joke. I'd be willing to lay money on some audience turning up for a production of Bayadère sometime in the very near future and finding themselves running the gauntlet of a bunch of nose-ringed revolutionaries screaming about cultural appropriation or hate speech or maybe, perhaps in this case, hate dance against an ethnic minority. What's next? How about a performance of Aladdin? Well, that's set in China, so we can't have that, can we? Or even a television serial, an adaptation of Balzac's Cousin Bette. That's set in France. Oh, hang on a minute. Perhaps we'd get away with setting someone in France. Even the revolutionaries in Britain don't like the French. Personally, I've never forgiven the French for inventing the EU and then expecting us Brits to stick to the rules that they don't. But I digress. Let's get back to Lloyd Webber. There was a subject that I really wanted to consider doing, he revealed this week. But everyone was saying to me, come on, you can't do this, because you're not from that country. He didn't say which country it was, but then it doesn't really matter. The new rule, it seems, is that artists must write only about the country they come from, and that's that. If Tim Rice and I were to be doing a Vita today, he added, I think there would be a lot of people who would say, well, they're not qualified to do this because they're not Argentine. By this logic, they shouldn't have written Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat either, given that neither of them grew up in ancient Canaan, nor are they Jewish, I believe. Nor, as far as I'm aware, have they ever lived in Nazareth, which rules out Jesus Christ Superstar. And then, now who wrote this? Michael Deacon. Then he says, I suppose we should just be grateful that this peculiar rule didn't exist in Shakespeare's day, otherwise we'd have been deprived of almost every play he wrote. All we'd have is King Lear, The Merry Wives of Windsor and the Histories. And even then he'd have had to end Henry V halfway through Act 2 because after that it's set in France. And that's the problem. The arts are, as I said in my previous video, I'll leave a link to that in the description, the arts will wither away because we have no cultural anchor anymore and not enough confidence in the validity of our own culture, especially in Britain. Of course, I can't speak for other places because I'm not allowed to speak for other places, am I now? So we're narrowing things down and down until finally there'll be nothing left. And talking about nothing, let's get back to the church. Even if the teachings of the church are honoured more in the breach than in the observance, they were there as the standard cultural reference. And now we've just got fashionable ideas that change, well, like the tides, in, out, different waves every time. And I'm not saying that we all have to readopt religion. What I am saying, though, is that when the Church of England casts off its line and allows itself to float here and there on the sea of woke, we are all at sea, not just the Christians, all the people of these islands, because we all rely on that framework, that moral framework, to negotiate our lives. Meanwhile, while I give you another example of woke anti-culture destroying art, and since Bayadère is off the cards, I shall show you a clip of the Lancashire Wallopers doing a clog dance. This one's for you, Jack. Meanwhile, I shall tell you about Elizabeth Gilbert. She wrote, among other things, a blockbuster called Eat, Pray, Love, of which you might have heard. And she's just finished another novel, The Snow Forest. It's set in Soviet Russia. It's all ready for publication, but it's not packing the shelves at your local bookstore. Actually, it's nowhere to be seen. because it's been postponed indefinitely. I suppose after the foregoing you'll have guessed why. Of course, it's possible that Gilbert might have considered it wasn't up to her standards, but I think it's far more likely that she was worried about the criticisms she was going to get for setting a story in Russia. It's really a serious problem, you know. This isn't funny. Greg's pie, anyone? Till next time.